Hey, Bomb Squad. If you're a comedian or a podcaster looking for an affordable website solution with a modern look, then we recommend Puck's Hub. With a Puck's Hub website, you can set up your new website in minutes with easy-to-use pre-built templates. Puck's Hub websites are customizable and can easily be integrated with other platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. The best part? Puck's Hub plans are only $5 per month. We use Puck's Hub for our website at the Art of Bombing podcast, and we think you should too. That's why we've partnered with Puck's Hub to offer listeners a free 60-day trial. Head over to puckshub.com to subscribe and use promo code AOBPOD at checkout for your 60-day free trial, and then pay only $5 per month after that. Take your career to the next level with your own Puck's Hub website today.
Dan Bublitz Comedy Productions.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, 'cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing.
Welcome to an all-new episode of The Art of Bombing presents Between Bombs Callbacks, where we call back the most recent episode and talk about where we dive deeper into some of the subjects and themes that came up. This week, we are calling back episode 272 with AJ Finney. It was a fantastic episode. I'm going to do it right up front. I'm finally remembering after 4 or 5 of these to say, if you haven't listened to that episode, you should. We're going to stop right now and give
stop
you
right
time.
now. Okay. Yeah, just take a second and go listen to it. We'll be right here, guys.
Okay, now that you listen to it.
Welcome
now
back.
You can welcome back. Yeah, welcome back. And now this episode's going to make more sense. What
Yeah,
we're talking
it's
about
all-
today. Yeah.
All the content, all the context, all the backstory.
Yeah,
So-
it matters.
Yeah, well, let's lay out an agenda, Dano. Let's say, okay, we have a couple of topics for today. One is confidence on stage.
That's a huge, and confidence is huge in comedy.
That's right. So confidence. We're also going to talk about other comics when they're watching you. It doesn't always mean they're being jerks when they're quiet.
Yep,
We didn't have
absolutely.
a quick way to encapsulate that. It kind of is what it is.
Yeah,
and then-
exactly. I mean, that's
And third, the magnified perception you can feel as a performer or a comic about your own set versus reality.
That's right. And yeah, that's another thing that it definitely happens a lot. You see that with, there's that illusion where sometimes a comic will go on stage and you'll be watching them and they're doing terrible and they get off stage and like, did you see me? I just crushed. And then it goes but it goes the other way where a comic's up there and they're doing very well and they get off stage and they're like, man, I sucked.
Right. Yeah.
Happens, the latter happens to me more than anything, where I'll get off stage and be like, I could have did better.
Yeah. There's an established comic in town, and I was doing a show with him several years ago, and he really got into his head, just like you're saying. Like he was doing fine to the extent that, several audience members was like, why did that guy end his set early? Which he did, because he thought he was doing so poorly. He had such a bad read of the room that he stopped the performance and said, I'm just going to give it back to your host. I can tell this isn't really working. And he was newer into his career then. He's still very talented and still, capable of doing really well. But that particular night, he really thought he ate it and didn't. So it was, I think that's one of the bigger, just watching it. Like I've had my own, incorrect magnification of failure in the past. I can definitely speak to that, but just I'm giving you that example. It's because it's one that I got to witness in the third person.
Yeah,
Because that's really where I could see both sides. Like I could see him and his performance, and I knew it was going fine. And then I also had the perspective of being with him backstage when he was just like completely wrong just in reading or interpreting what the audience thought of it. Now, was it his best set? No, probably had a few things that weren't hitting, but I just thought it was a really bad set, or
Well,
really bad read.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it sometimes that's why, if you're listening to this podcast and you're not necessarily a comedian, maybe you're a comedy fan, you like going to shows. That's why it is important for the audience to participate in the sense of, laughing out loud, audibly laughing and showing the comedians that you're enjoying the show
Yeah,
because we feed off that energy and and you feed off our energy, but it's like this weird, it's a give and take where, our energy, and it's a synergy too, because when we perform, if we're doing really well and the audience is really into the show and they're giving us that audible laughter and showing that they're having a good time, then we feed off that energy and it just keeps getting better and better, better, better,
yeah,
as the set goes on. So, but when you have that opposite effect where people are enjoying it, but not showing it, in our
right.
heads, we're like, oh no, I'm bombing.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
our performance starts lacking because we're in our head. We go into panic mode. We're like, I got to find something to win this audience back or win them over.
That's what's so dangerous, and that happened to me the night I was hosting the show you were at in St. Joe when you were here.
Mm-hmm.
The audience wasn't necessarily not liking the show. And the way I could tell that that was the case later, after I had time to analyze it, was I was using save lines that weren't working. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
typically you something's not going very well, like the audience is into it, but they're just not into you. You can say something to call that fact out, or well, this isn't going very well, or bombing, kind of like I am right now. Like some kind of save line that acknowledges the situation. And I was using that, and people kind of were like, well, I don't really feel that way about you. I don't feel that the show's not going well. I just haven't been to a comedy show before, or, you know, I'm from a small town. We have kind of a thinned out audience in a room where, the mic can only get so loud, and it can't really dominate the space the way that it needs to, and all these other factors. I'm in a coffee shop, not a coffee, like the lights are on in here, all these different factors like were playing into that. And then
Mm-hmm.
just watching the other comics, it was the same for everybody. Like, okay, but I think once people realize that's just how they are, I think that's really what set everybody at ease.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, it's funny because going back to that show, there was a couple other comedians that didn't feel like they did very well either, and and one, kind of leaned into that more so than they should have because they
Right.
kept bringing it up, and I think in those situations, that's where you really have to be careful because then you start making the audience feel uncomfortable because
Yeah.
you're pointing out, oh, you're not enjoying this, but they're like, but we are,
Right.
we're just not enjoying it the way you want us to enjoy it in the sense,
Yeah.
where it's like you want us to laugh out loud. We're just not laugh out loud people, but that doesn't mean we're not enjoying it. And now you're making us feel uncomfortable
That's right. You're
and
right.
making
And
it,
and now and that's the self-fulfill, like you were talking about how the energy builds, right?
yep,
Like if it's going well, it builds in a good direction. Like they're providing the feedback, you're enjoying it and building on that energy, and you're a better performer because of it, because you have confidence. And then this is just the total opposite, right? Like I'm not feeling, because you're not, I loved how you said that too. You're not enjoying it the way I expected you to, or the way that I wanted
yep.
you to. Now I don't think you're enjoying it at all. And now I'm saying it, but I'm wrong. And now you're uncomfortable. And now you're really not enjoying the show, which I now am correct about. And
Yeah, now I'm correct because I made it this
exactly.
way.
And I made it
I
this way.
manifested this.
Yeah. I feel like that came up in a recent episode as well, is how we have to be accountable for how many things go wrong. It's not always the audience's fault. It's not always just a bad audience. As a comic, I think we're more in control of that situation than we think.
Oh, we
And we should
absolutely
at
are.
least always behave as if we are.
Yeah. And I think, and it's obviously it's easier said than done, but that's why it's important to give your best performance for it doesn't matter how big the audience is, whether it's, one person in the audience or a sold out auditorium, that you should give the best performance you possibly can. And even when it doesn't seem like they may not be enjoying it, you have to have that, in the back of your mind that especially with smaller audiences, laughter's contagious and people are very self-conscious about laughing out loud. And it's easy to forget that. And then you get in that situation where it's a smaller audience and they're not necessarily laughing, but it's not that they're doing, it's not that they're not enjoying the show. It's just that they're self-conscious about laughing out loud. And you got to keep that. And where it's easier said than done is to keep performing like they're enjoying it and
Right.
trying to keep building that energy. You have to go,
Yeah.
they are enjoying it. Even though their face says the opposite, they are enjoying this. And you keep,
Yeah.
performing the best that you possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right in terms of like how to handle it. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's what you got to do. And I think it's also okay to ask them, okay, guys, just trying to read the room here. Are you guys enjoying this? And then, yeah, we are. Okay. Okay. So this is how you enjoy it then. Okay. So that's
Yep.
cool. And then you don't have to laugh out loud if you don't want to. We're all right. I'll keep going, and that's all it really needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a little bit of validation and whether you have to ask for it or they give it to you. But you're right. And that can make a huge difference bringing it up, like
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, are you guys having a good time?" And when they say yes, then okay, this is just how they enjoy a comedy show. Now I'm going to lean into that and
Yeah.
I'm going to give them a good show and I'm going to lean into the way that they enjoy it, however
Nice.
that may be. Yeah.
Yeah. And
But it
it
goes
could
Oh,
It
go
could
ahead.
even loosen them up to the point where they do start laughing out loud. Who knows? Like you can't, like, there's nothing wrong about doing it that way. Like you can't make it any worse doing it that way.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Where you like you said, where you are going to make it worse is when you make those assumptions and then you lean into that assumption and you keep bringing it up. Oh, you're not having a good time and this and that and whatever, and then you go in that opposite direction to where eventually they get to where they don't have a good time because you made it happen. And
Yeah.
we want
And
everybody to have a good time
you
at
do.
a
And
comedy show.
to just, fork right off that sort of same road is the idea that when comics are watching you and they don't appear to be having a good
Yeah,
time.
and this is also gonna tie into confidence later that we're gonna talk
Yeah.
about. This
uh,
all of this, that perception it ties into all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're doing it the right way to talk about the things that sort of cause us to lose composure or confidence
Yep.
first.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and one of the big ones is, okay, what are the comics doing? And I catch myself doing this, especially when I'm at mics and it's mostly comics. It's hard to not do this. Is what do they really think? And in the episode with AJ, I thought that he helped me look at that a little differently, right? Like I'm in front of comics all the time, and sometimes maybe they're, first of all, let's just break it down, right? You're performing in front of a comic. They're If they're going to perform later, they're thinking about their set.
Yep.
So there's really very little you can do to sort of to break that spell. If they've already gone and they're watching your set, they're probably comparing, or they could be. And if they're not going to perform at all, and they're watching you perform, well, why is he performing and not me? There's lots of things like that that could be going on in their minds, but we don't really know. But I thought
Nope.
AJ gave us some things that we could, like some additional context that we can paint in for people right quick. Like I think the easy route is to say, well, they would rather be up here than me, or they could do a better job than me, or they're trying not to laugh so that they can take something away from me, or they know because they're a comic that I'm going to easily spot them in the audience because they're not laughing. Or we always just, like a heat-seeking missile, target the person who's not having a good time because that's just who we are.
Yep.
And I don't really think it's that malicious I think when I'm watching comics and if I miss a punchline and I'm not laughing, I think it plays into what AJ was saying, which is this idea that, well, maybe he's learning something from me right now. Maybe
Yep.
he's watching me and analyzing what I'm doing to try to understand how I write my jokes. Or, okay, let's walk the punchline and the laugh backward to a point earlier in the writing process, which I'm still at for a current joke that I'm working on. And is that in some way helpful to me? Like, I think there's a lot of analysis that happens. And I think if comics are analyzing, or if they're quiet, and it could be because they're analyzing you. And if they're analyzing you, they respect you.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something I know. I do that all the time. That a lot of times when I'm watching comedy or and watching other comedians, I'm in my head not about what necessarily I'm going to be doing. I mean, if I haven't performed, if I'm on the show and I haven't performed, a lot of times, yes, I'm thinking about what I'm going to be doing. So I'm not really paying attention to the show anyway, because like you said, you're getting ready for your set, you're doing your things, you're going through your set, you're doing those things. So even though you're in the room, you're kind of in your own little world. You're not really paying attention. But in the situations where I've already performed and now I'm watching the show and I can relax, or I'm not even on the show, uh, I'm I'm very analytical. I'm watching a show and watching these comedians to kind of get an idea of their process, because it's kind of like like you said, you kind of get very analytical about it. And I know that's how I am, because I can look at a comedian that tells a joke, and that joke not necessarily be funny to me or necessarily be my kind of material or my cup of tea, but I can look at it from a comedian's point of view and an analytical point of view and be like, I totally understand why this audience like that material.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this before, where I can objectively look at that and be like, it's not for me. I didn't think it was great,
Right.
but I understand why everybody else did. Because and I think that's the same for a lot of comedians. When we're watching other comedians, we're all trying to get better at our craft, and that's watching both for good and bad. When you see somebody doing bad, you really hone in on that to be like, well, I want to make sure I don't do this, I don't do that. I seen what they did there. Like an example would be a comedian starts losing his audience and then lashes out on him. And you're like, well,
Hmm.
that's a lesson you can learn. Don't get angry and take it out on the audience, because now they're going to be uncomfortable, and that happens a lot in comedy. It seems like comedians, they lose their confidence and then they blow up and they lash out.
I think if all you have to do is listen to this show, right? Like we've
Yeah.
had several people on who talk about their worst bombing story in the context of making a wrong choice and how they address the audience.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know,
And that's a lot of what comedy is, as making choices, when you're on stage, and both good and bad, choices and taking risks. But taking a risk, you're still making a choice on taking that risk or not taking that risk. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. Uh, but you have to make those decisions, and then you have to have the accountability for the choice you made, whether it turned out to be good or bad.
that's right. That's right.
It definitely kind of goes hand in hand. But yeah, but going back to what you said, I always too, like, I've ran into comedians, lots of conversations about this where, they're working really hard to, they want to make the back of the room laugh. And if you're one of those comedians that you want to be the funniest comedian in the room and you want to make all the other comedians laugh, remember that you're going to be unbookable, because a lot of
Hmm.
times what you're going to end up doing is you're going to do jokes that are inside baseball. So they're going to be
Hmm.
jokes that only comedians are going to laugh at, and that's not good to get you booked.
Exactly.
I've seen plenty of comedians that were great comedians, but they always played to the back of the room. And so they end up not getting booked as often as they'd like. And they're just like, I don't get it. I'm funny. How come I don't get booked? And I always say, well, it's because you're not relatable to your audience. That's what you got
That's
to
right.
remember. When you're writing your material, don't worry about what comedians think one way or another, because you need to be worrying about what the paying audience And that's who matters in these scenarios. Because if you can't make them laugh, you're not going to get booked. You know, people are professional bookers. They want to book people that are going to, you know, make those audience members laugh because they paid to be there. And then hopefully they'll pay to come back to another show. And if you
Yeah.
can't do that, you're not going to get booked.
Yeah. Here's the secret to crushing at an open mic, everybody. Ready? Do crowd work that is right now in the moment, and extra points if you're able to do crowd work successfully that comes at another comic's expense that everybody knows. If you can do that, they will roll, right? Anytime I've ever absolutely just blown the roof off of an open mic, it's because I abandon my material and go, you know, get some payback for something somebody shot my way, and that feels I feel vindicated for everybody, and they've been waiting on me to come up to say something back, or I do some impression of a comic because of what he or she is doing, and it somehow serves this other narrative, and it's about calling out things that have been said in other sets. Like
Yep.
that's another big way to win a room for. So it's not that those tactics are necessarily bad. I'm not condemning the skill that you can get from being able to do that. And I think you can translate even some of those things into a workable set. But I absolutely agree with you, Dan. I think you can't worry too much about what a comic thinks. I think you have to go in and work on you and your stuff that's ultimately bookable to
You got to
people
play to
who
the
pay for tickets.
Yeah, you got to play to the front of the room, not the back of the room.
Exactly.
Because the front of the room, you paid to be there.
And all these roads, they lead us to confidence, right?
They do.
You have to you create confidence by, certainly when people are laughing, like that's what you came there for, and that's the ultimate way to build confidence, is to have some is to be able to be successful with your material, or at least feel like you are. So with that sort of one obvious one there, Dan, what would you say? I'm coming at you with a question here.
Oh, okay, sorry, I'm ready to go. But
yeah,
I'm ready to drop some insight.
I know,
or my thoughts, I should say.
And I'm gonna feed that energy by asking you.
Remember what we were talking about before about feeding? The energy. At the very beginning, audience. That's what we're talking about. He's about to feed my
demonstration. So what besides having successful jokes, Dan, getting laughed at by the audience, what are some things within the comic's control, do you think, that can help you create and sustain confidence when you perform?
Well, for me personally, this is just things that have worked for me. I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody, but one thing that helped me build more confidence on stage was taking an improv class. I've talked about it before on the show. I'm not going to go perform improv with an improv troupe. I don't, I like watching some improv, but I don't like participating. I don't think I'm good at it, but it did help me build more confidence because it gave me the ability to it helped build my stage presence, and stage presence is part of your confidence. Having if you have a good stage presence, it's probably because you're very confident in who you are as a person. So to build confidence, doing stuff like that, basically the best way to, and it doesn't have to be improv, it can be kind of anything. Doing things that are outside of your comfort zone are what's going to build your confidence, not just on stage, but just in life in general. If you go do things that make you uncomfortable, example, maybe you're not a person that's very good at socializing and you don't like talking to people, you don't like going to social events. Well, one thing that's going to make you uncomfortable is going to that party that you got invited to and you were planning on not going. Instead, force yourself to go to that party. Force yourself to make a conversation with somebody. Is it going to be easy because you have that social anxiety? Absolutely not. This is something I struggle with all the time in my personal life. While it's a wild thing to be a comedian and we go out, we perform in front of crowds of people and we're around people all the time, I have a lot of social anxiety. I don't like being in social situations outside of my little friend groups, my closeness. But I still try to force myself to go do those things. But that's what's going to really build your confidence is doing things that make you uncomfortable, even on stage. If you want to get better at crowd work, like you had that example earlier, the best way to get better at crowd work and get comfortable doing crowd work is to do crowd work, even if it's bad. And forcing yourself to do these things you're not comfortable with on stage. Maybe you're not comfortable writing one liners. Well, then sit down and just force yourself to try to write some one liners. You just have to face it's just like with fear. Confidence comes a lot too with being afraid. Your lack of confidence is because you're afraid of something. Well, the only way to get over fears is to just face them and do the thing that you're afraid of. And then once you do that thing, you realize, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And for me, and I've talked about it a bunch on this podcast because I had a big fright of I had stage fright. I was very afraid of public speaking. So for me to actually be where I am now, I had to overcome a lot of obstacles, a lot of fear. And the only way I did it was just finally saying, I'm going to go up and do this. I signed up for that open mic. I forced myself to do it. And even to the very moment when they about to call my name, I was like, oh man, I should just leave.
Yeah.
Like I was still ready to run out the door with my tail between my legs. But
Yep.
they called my name and I walked out on stage and it changed everything.
Right.
I
That's
was still
interesting.
nervous.
Yeah.
Sometimes today, but
I'm such an opposite personality from you, but I feel like I'm exactly the same when it comes to the journey or like the nerves that you get and all of that. It's the same for everybody. I'm more of an extrovert, competitive, aggressive type of person, and like but I'm gonna process things differently, right? Like if I go out and have a good set, I don't want to like enjoy it in a lab by myself. Like that's when you're gonna find me like at the bar, like hanging out late after the show. Because I'm gonna draw on that. Here it is again. Draw on that energy
Yep.
that other people are giving me because that's where I get it. But we both do when it comes to actually performing the craft, right? Like you can be an extrovert and be an accountant, and you can be an introvert and be a stand-up comic. It's really interesting how like personality differences and how people are wired, introverted or extroverted or whatever brand of personality profiling you subscribe to. Like people, it is a passion for people on all sides of that matrix.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, kind of going back to what I was saying about doing things that make you uncomfortable will help build your confidence, which is true. And if you're somebody who isn't necessarily a performer and you're listening to this podcast and you want to try to, do something to even in your own life, if you're just trying to build confidence, and I've had this conversation with my partner, she works, she works a government job, but she is in a leadership role and she has to do some public speaking and things like that. And she's not necessarily, it's not her favorite cup of tea. She lacks a little bit of confidence. And I've even told her that, I highly recommend go take either a stand-up class or go take an improv class. Take one of these classes, not because you want to be in entertainment, but because it will help build confidence.
Yeah.
That's why you'll see so many improv and, kind of corporate team building, improv. You'll see a lot of like improv troops do corporate stuff for team building. And that's why, because it's a good way to build confidence. So if you're just wanting to build your confidence, that's something that I highly recommend to everybody. Take a class of some sort. Do the things that make you uncomfortable. And, as long as you're not being a crappy person to somebody, if, killing somebody might make you uncomfortable, but don't do that. That's not what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I do hear what you mean in terms of being uncomfortable, and failure's uncomfortable. I think
That
you have to
absolutely is.
fail at this. I think you have
Yeah.
to fail at this and really anything that you do. That's a big way to create confidence, is to live through that experience and allow yourself to fail.
Yep. And then get back up and do it again and,
Yeah.
keep going. I had a show last night and there was somebody in the audience that was watching the show. They're thinking about doing some stand-up. They've been writing, and I asked them if they were going to be coming to the open mic that they do at this venue, and said they were thinking about it, and they were, they mentioned that they were afraid of failing. That was like their biggest fear, is that they were going to go up and nobody's going to laugh. And I was like, well, that's part of it. That's what you got to do. You got to go up there and do that.
And that's going to happen to you tonight.
It's like,
but,
regardless, it's going to happen at some point. So just face that fear and then go listen to our podcast. We talk about this all the time. That's also
we'll build you right back up, guys.
That was my other advice to them was, if you're really worried about it and you want to learn some stuff, listen to our podcast, because that's all we talk about.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to end it.
I think so too. This has been a great episode. Thank you guys for listening. Tune in on Monday for an all new episode of The Art of Bombing, episode 273. We got Thomas Nichols, another fantastic comedian that is here in the Fort Collins area where I live. He's becoming a good buddy of mine because he's also, like me, very nerdy. He's actually has some comic books that he's written, so he's got some comic books and stuff out there. But anyway, he'll be on the show next week. The week after that is going to be, believe it or not, it's going to be our 6-year anniversary. This podcast has been going for 6 years, and that blows my mind. Blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's wild. And it's going to be a fun one, because I think what I'm going to do for the 6-year anniversary is I'm going to release a live episode. That's right. We're going to be doing an Art of Bombing live at the Chief Comedy Festival down in Trinidad, Colorado. Yeah, that's right. So Friday, May 5th, 3 p.m., we're doing a live version. They've got me hooked up with 4 fantastic comedians. I don't know if you remember the live, when we've done live episodes, it's a mixture. So what's going to happen is each comedian's going to do like 10 minutes of live stand up, and then I'm going to talk to them about bombing for about 10 minutes. They're going to tell a story. I don't have time to go in deep with every guest as we usually do when we do the one-on-ones, because I'm on a time constraint and have multiple guests, but it's going to be amazing. So that's going to be the 7-year anniversary, or the 6-year anniversary show is going to be live from the Chief Comedy Festival in Trinidad, Colorado. So that's going to be wild, and that's coming up.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's all right. Well, let's get out of here. Thanks for listening. Make sure you follow the show wherever you listen to the show. Do the things, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Back and see us.
This has been a Dan Bublitz comedy production. Roar.